afternoon, and welcome to the Executive Summit. I'm Duke Worthington, and I have the pleasure of interviewing, I guess we'll say, Jodi Fincher. I just had a wonderful chat before we were able to come out here and do this. I appreciate all that you all have had the opportunity to read. If you read the bios and all that, it's amazing to see where she's come from and what she's gone. But the time that I took and the questions I asked were more about her family, where she came from, some things like that she was wonderful in sharing some of those. So we'll get into the business side, we'll get into some of the other, but we may talk a little bit about basketball. There's been a little history there, yeah. So there's some good things to go. Please read the bio when you get a chance. We won't take the time to do that unless there's some things we'll point out, but take some time to look through that and watch where she's progressed and where she started and how this is all going. I want to start, if I may, first of all, by talking about your experiences in ICU. You started out emergency room, and if we backed up a little bit further, you told me that you had always wanted to be in healthcare?
Yes.
How does that come about?
I don't know. You know, when I was a kid, I had friends that I always had the friend who did everyone's hair and makeup, and we always had the friend, we always had our niche, and I was always the one when someone got hurt who put the Band-Aid on. The more blood and guts I saw, the better, so it was just natural. And I'm completely opposite now that I spent 20 years at the bedside taking care of patients, and now if I never see it again, that's just fine. But so it was just always my mom's a social worker, and I could never do what she did, and she could never do what I do. So it's good we all don't like to do the same thing, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
And in our conversation earlier, you mentioned your parents several times. Just want to give a shout out. Mr. and Mrs., is it Waldron? Is that right?
Yes.
Are right here in the audience today, as is
my husband
Joe. And I think that's, is it Schnook?
It is.
Okay. Joe Schnook. See, we can be your own person. Everything's good. We were talking about that. So glad you're all here. Everybody, we welcome you. Let's dig in a little further. One of the things you talked about in the ICU was the lessons you learned. And I thought that was pretty amazing in how you took what you were dealing with for all those years with different people. Tell me a little more about that. What were some things that went on?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me as an ICU nurse was I intersected perfect strangers' lives, because as a nurse, you walk into a patient's room that you've never met before, and you say, "Hi, I'm Jodi, I'm going to be your nurse, and now I'm going to look at you completely naked. There's not any crevice or part of you I'm not going to look at. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions." So it's this instant, intimate relationship that you build. And of course, nursing is considered the most trusted profession that there is. So it's fairly easy to do. But I intersected people's lives in the ICU during their worst hour, right? No one wants to be an ICU patient. They don't expect to be an ICU patient. And then the families are even a more critical element of the people who I meet as they're dealing with the critical illness or situation of their loved one. And what I learned is that during the worst hour for some people, they are the most gracious and the most amazing. So the best human spirit often comes out during the worst time. And that was always amazing to me. And so as a leader, that's been the biggest takeaway from me from my nursing years, is that when I have 900 people that work at St. Joseph Medical Center, and what I have learned is that there's no such thing as a bad employee or a problem employee. It's always an employee who has bad behavior or bad performance or bad attendance. And there is almost always a story behind that. People don't necessarily wake up and decide, hey, I'm going to go to work today and be a problem. They wake up and they wonder how they're going to, get their loved one to a cancer appointment. They wake up and wonder, how they're going to get, how many of you have had your kids wake up in the morning and say, hey, Mom, I need 3 dozen cookies for the school thing today, or I need a green dress for my recital tonight, and we don't have a green dress. So it's very difficult for people to separate work from life. I tell them all the time, work gets in the way of life and life gets in the way of work. And so really understanding the story of the people who I work for. My philosophy is I work for those 900 people. None of them work for me. They work for taking care of our patients and making sure our patients have got great outcomes. I work for them. So it's important that we know their story.
Wow. And was there a little bit of advice or guidance that your father gave you regarding employees and how people work?
He's given me a lot of advice.
There was one in particular you mentioned that was pretty cool.
So my dad ran, he was in the farm industry, and he ran big machine shops that built big farm implement, cattle feeders and lots of different stuff. So I would say he had a pretty scrappy workforce that worked for him over the years. And he's taught me a lot about leadership, about being fair and consistent and treating everyone the same. Maybe sometimes it's nice to dress the way your workforce dresses. So put my scrubs on sometimes now that I don't dress in scrubs, although I would love to dress in scrubs again. And so that you're visible and accessible as a leader. But probably the greatest lesson he ever taught me was that as a leader, you will always spend 80% of your time on 20% of your workforce, right? And no matter how hard you work, and it's not fun to work with that 20%, right? Because I'm not talking about your high achievers. I'm talking about your workforce who display bad behavior or have bad performance or whatever the case may be. And so you work really hard with that 20%, even though you just wish they would go away. You work really hard to either manage them up to their greatest potential or to manage them out of your organization. And when you successfully do that, manage them up or manage them out, you think, oh my God, now I'm down to 90-10. But that's not true, because there's always someone on deck and in the hole, and they've got the bat and they've got the little weight on the end, man, and they're warming up and they are ready to come to the plate to refill that 20%. And it's true whether you have 10 people who work for you or 900 people who work for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you notice the sports analogy there. She says that she uses several of those, so I'm going to back up a little bit now that we've jumped into some things that you've learned. And you came from where? Grew up where in Kansas?
I grew up in Dodge City, Kansas. So I tell people I'm Miss Kitty's great-great-great-great-granddaughter. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't think so.
And I think most everyone in here can remember Miss Kitty. There are a few who may not know, but yeah,
and
that's
she was
cool.
a leader. She ran a very successful brothel, I understand. Yes.
Well, yeah, she had Matt's ear, I'll tell you that. She for sure did. Growing up like that, sports, very athletic, played basketball, even into college.
Yeah.
And then continued with some coaching and lessons learned. You did both high school and AAU, okay.
Yeah.
So now we'll kind of go back a little bit and then come back up to where you are today.
Yeah. So that was a very important part of my life, sports, and still is. I would say that coaching was really important for me to develop my leadership skills. And probably the most important thing I learned in coaching, in particular AAU, because for any of you who are familiar with the AAU circuit, AAU basketball is just really designed to get premier basketball players in front of college coaches. So we just travel all over the United States all summer long, and that's where there's a concentration of college scouts who can see these great athletes play. And so the stakes are high, right? Because we have parents and we have great athletes who want to get college scholarships, and they want to get them at certain colleges. And, it never fails that, we would go somewhere and by golly, Pat Summitt, any basketball fans in the room? So Pat Summitt from Tennessee, some of her scouts would be in the room, and, we've got, everybody wanted to play for Pat Summitt. And that player would just have a terrible game. it would kind of never fail. And so I actually had a contract that I had signed with my parents that after any game, I am happy to talk to you about your daughter's performance or talk to my players, but we're going to wait 24 hours before we have that conversation. Because inevitably, there's a little line of parents at the locker room door waiting to chat with you. So we would just sign that in advance. And really, you know, what I've learned about controlling emotions is that some people are really good at split-second emotional decisions, right? So I always go back to Newton's law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so some people in that split second before the reaction happens can very eloquently and graciously construct a response. Some people, you know, give the speech that they'll regret forever and use language and terms that they really wish they would have never used. And so that's what I learned from that experience, is that sometimes you need to just wait, because you don't want to say anything that you'll regret for a really long time. And I found that then we can have an intelligent conversation and everybody's calmed down, and maybe they've had time to look at the video and go, oh my God, she did suck, you know, geez, no wonder you pulled her out. So I learned that. Good.
So coaching, moved into being a professional. At some point through there, you also created a Brady Bunch family, five kids.
Yeah.
So you guys cruising along 20 years now.
I know.
Grandkids and another one, grandchild, and another one on the way.
Yeah.
So life continues on even when you're moving up the ladder and doing all these wonderful things.
It does, isn't it great?
It does, yep. Athlete, ran different things that you were involved with, ran marathons and been involved in all that. So the athletic part of it's a big section and chunk of what you've done. So the sports analogies continue on.
Yeah, they do.
As you guide St. Joseph. What did you find was a turning point for you to move into the leadership roles? Was there any person, mentors, or people or things that begin to help you form that ability or desire to move in? What created that for you?
Oh, for me, it was just sort of natural. When I became a nurse, I very quickly became a charge nurse and became a mentor and preceptor to new nurses. I just had a natural draw to leadership. I love to teach. That's the other thing we haven't talked about. I've been an adjunct professor at University of St. Mary up in Leavenworth for their nursing program. And so I love to teach as well. So all of those things combined together. I did have an ICU director while I was young in my nursing career who really recognized that in me and tried to foster that in me. And when a great opportunity came up, she had to sort of push me towards it. It was a brand new position it was a clinical supervisor for critical care at the hospital I worked at. And it was a really neat experience to be the first one in that job and really build that job. But I tell people all the time, I think we get told a lot, you know, don't say yes to everything. You know, we'll overextend ourselves. Don't say, you know, you got to, you know, use yes judiciously. And I'm quite the opposite. I really say when an opportunity presents itself, even if it's a stretch opportunity, say yes, because that is really truly what has opened my doors for me. My rise to being, you know, a nursing assistant while I was going to nursing school to being the CEO of a very large hospital has been because I just got outside of my comfort zone, leaned into things. Let's talk about revenue cycle. So I'm a nurse. So I didn't learn anything about revenue cycle. But when I realized that to be a great nurse leader, I was going to have to understand the business end of healthcare, because how we get paid in healthcare is one of the most complicated lectures you can ever go through, because we don't charge $100 and get paid $100. So the revenue cycle in healthcare is very complex. And as payers were moving from really a pay-for-performance model model, I knew I needed to have a better business perspective. So I leaned in and went and got my MBA so I could be a better business leader, because I knew clinically I understand what's happening, but I need to understand the business end of what we do. So lean in. That's my advice.
And I had that written down. She mentioned leaning into the challenges and some of the people that you learn both positives and negatives. Just some leaders that tell. What were you saying about that?
So I've had some great leaders that I have learned wonderful leadership skills and styles from, and I think that is so key to have those great mentors. But I have also had some leaders that I have learned what not to do as a leader, and I think those leaders have been as important to me in being an effective leader as the great ones were. Because, for instance, have you ever worked for a leader who's mad all the time, or worked with somebody? They're just mad all the damn time, you know? And new people come to work and they go, and they're like, oh my gosh, and they go, oh no, don't worry about her, she's just mad all the time. So then when that leader really needs to get mad and really make a point, it really is hard, because nobody really knows it. Now you're really mad, right? And so I really preach using mad judiciously and use it on purpose and when you need to really get a point across, because in my line of business, sometimes I need to get mad to make a point that we're not in the widget building business. We're in the saving lives and not hurting people business, and there's risk at every turn in a hospital. So we use mad judiciously.
Cool. What has been one of the biggest challenges you've faced since you've taken over at St. Joseph?
Oh, well, let's see. I've been there for 3 years, and I've aged 30.
Okay, that's what I was going to say.
So it was not a healthy hospital when I got there.
That's what I was going to ask.
There were a lot of challenges. I would say probably the most effective thing I did to move St. Joe from losing money to, in 2018, St. Joe had the most profitable year it's had in about 15 years, is not only right-sizing my leadership team, but getting the right talent skill mix in my leadership team, and getting people who, for lack of a better term, would drink the Kool-Aid and understand that the way that we're going to run this hospital will work. You've just got to be willing to lean in. And so I always reference, again, basketball, the 1992 Olympic men's basketball team. What was unique about that team, sports fans? So that was the first year that professionals, yes. And so that team was stacked to the brim, right? So Charles Barkley, John Stockton, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, like crazy talent, coached by Chuck Daly. And people really thought, well, and they annihilated everyone, right? Annihilated. And everyone thought, how hard could it be to coach that team? And I don't think Chuck Daly ever got the credit he deserved for coaching that team, because let's just talk about egos first and foremost. But you just have to have the right five on the floor at all the time, right? So as your opponent changes and as your competition changes, right, you have to counter those. And so it was really, to me, one of the most amazing feats of coaching, even though I don't think he ever got credit for it. So as a leader, it's just really important that we have to have people that aren't just like us, and we have to have people that challenge us as leaders. People really think of conflict as a negative thing, but I think healthy conflict, lots of good comes from bartering and challenging, and ideas come up that would never come up if my team are just yes people. And oh yes, Jodi, that's a great idea. No, I need them to say that is a horrible idea, or well, what about this? And so that's the way we work in our leadership team, and having the right skill mix.
That's a powerful philosophy. I think I heard President Lincoln, when he was elected, took all of those that opposed him and spoke out against him and put them on his cabinet. And so powerful to be able to take, because you don't want the yes people.
Yeah, no.
And so you're doing some wonderful things. By the way, when she mentioned a bit of a turnaround in 2018, St. Joseph was in the Kansas City Journal. What was the recognition?
Well, in 2019, St. Joe was recognized as one of Kansas City's fastest growing, 50 fastest growing companies in Kansas City, and it's because of the great, we had a pretty good 17, but there was still a lot of heavy lifting to do, but 2018 was really a good year for us.
Which is when her full year came in and she was doing, which now in 2019, she's one of the 20 women who mean business, isn't that right, for the Kansas City Business Journal. So lots of good things going on right here, lots of powerful things. Tell me a little bit more. You're still in the Leavenworth area, is right?
Yeah.
That right? So been there how many years now?
Gosh, I've lived there for a little over 30 years, yeah.
That's home.
Yeah.
That's home. And so are you traveling? Are you pretty much locked in where you are? Or what does this position offer you now as far as being able to get out and work with other businesses, to learn, to share? What opportunities are you finding?
Yeah. So it's been a pretty cool experience. My only reservation about working at St. Joe was because I was previously the administrator at St. John Hospital up in Leavenworth, and I thought, oh, how can I run a hospital when I don't live in the community and I don't feel that community connection? But I have found that I'm a Rotarian, I'm on the Leawood Chamber of Commerce board, so it's easy for me to get embedded in and meet all the amazing people and the great companies who support St. Joe, and that I find that we can help support them. So it's the greatest thing is all the great relationships and people that we've met, and help them understand that St. Joe is back and it's stronger than it's ever been, and it's still a great place to come and get care.
So are you finding that you're out promoting what's going
Yes.
on? That's a
Yes.
big part of it.
Yes.
And how have you taken that? Is that being in the spotlight and doing those things? I asked you earlier and you
It
said
is,
more and more.
Yeah. So whatever chance I can get to pimp my hospital out, I'm out there doing it, man. I'm shameless. But it's because it's a great place to get care, and we have a great, committed, passionate workforce who loves what they do, and it's clear every single day.
Wow. Anything to share with the group as far as some takeaways that you found in this progression? And you said it was pretty much, it's been organic. I asked if there was any thought of being in a CEO position earlier on, and you said, heavens no. Share with me a little bit about
I've
that.
always thought, my God, who would ever want to do that job? That's awful. When I introduce myself, I just say I work at St. Joseph Medical Center, and then people inevitably say, well, what do you do? I'll say, well, I'm the CEO, but I'm also a nurse, because people like nurses, right? They tend to not like CEOs as much. But leaving the bedside was hard for me, and I resisted it, and my husband can tell you that I resisted it for a long time. And even up at St. John, when I was the administrator there, I still worked shifts in the ICU. And because I missed it, but I just wanted to keep my eye on the ball, right? In any sport that has a ball, you always got to know where the ball's at, right? Keep your eye on that ball. And so it helps me keep my eye on really what's important here, because we can get lost in all the minutiae of running a hospital. And so it's more difficult for me to do at St. Joe, because it's a much bigger place. But I round on patients almost every day, and I go up and just sit and have a chat, and how are we doing, and are we taking excellent care of you, and learning their story, because there are some amazing stories to hear.
Wow,
yeah.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Any takeaways or words of wisdom from your experiences and wonderful accomplishments you've already done, and we're anxious to see what continues to happen, but any takeaways from this?
Well, I think over the years I have learned that in managing a hospital, but it's not just a hospital, in any leadership position, there is a fight every minute that you could put your dog in, right? People ask me, well, what do you do for a living? I'm like, problems. I solve problems. I feel like that's just problems. But I've really learned what deserves my time and attention, because I have unfortunately learned the hard way that there are things that really don't deserve my time and attention, and I'm not going to put a dog in that fight. So I've learned really how to prioritize what deserves our attention, and it's usually related to just making sure that our patients are safe and well cared for.
I'm not real sure we can end that on any better note than that. I'm going to wrap up the interview at this point.
Has it been 30 minutes already?
We're just right at it. You did wonderfully, Jodi. Thank you so much for all of that and what you've shared. We're going to take a break here for a minute and get things set up so that we can ask some questions. If any of you have some, be thinking about some good questions, because with what she just shared, Jodi will have no problem.
Bring 'em
yeah,
on.
she likes that fight. Bring it on. So thanks again. Thank you so much. What an honor.
Thank you for getting here today.
Yeah, you bet,
Appreciate
you
it.
bet, you bet. Couple hour drive is well worth it.
All right,
So it's
all
good
right,
stuff.
thanks.
Yep. So thank you all very much,
thanks.
and thank you, Jodi.